November 2023, Charleston, South Carolina. When Rachel Morrison slid her last $5 bill across the county auction desk, she had no idea the crumbling railway terminal perched on the coastal cliff would hold a secret worth $10 million. The auctioneer had warned everyone about the deaths, about the 3 workers who'd plunged into the gorge when the cable snapped in 1933, about how every owner since had abandoned the cursed property within months. But Rachel was 9 days from homelessness with a 9-year-old daughter and no options left. What she discovered beneath a collapsed floor during a winter storm, a hidden vault sealed for 90 years, would either save her family or destroy everything she had left. Can you imagine finding millions in gold coins and having criminals show up at your door before you could even tell anyone? This is what happened, and the final 24 hours will leave you absolutely breathless. Rachel Morrison's hands trembled as the auctioneer's gavel cracked against the podium. Sold to bidder 23 for $5. She'd just purchased a derelict railway terminal on Charleston's coastal cliff for the price of a sandwich. A structure locals whispered was cursed, where 3 men had died when the cable mechanism failed in 1933. But Rachel wasn't thinking about curses or history. She was thinking about the eviction notice taped to her apartment door, salmon-colored and threatening, giving her 28 days to vacate. She was thinking about her daughter Lily's backpack held together with safety pins and the way other kids had started calling her the poor girl. She was thinking that even a condemned building was better than living in her car, which was exactly where they'd be in 3 weeks if something didn't change. The terminal sat 17 miles north of Charleston, where the old railway had once carried passengers and freight up the cliff face. Rachel made the drive that evening with Lily and their golden retriever Jasper, following increasingly narrow roads until they dead-ended at a gravel clearing. Fog rolled in from the Atlantic, thick and gray, and through it the structure emerged like something from a Gothic nightmare. 2 stories of weathered brick built directly into the cliff, rusted steel tracks emerging from a tunnel mouth, windows shattered and dark like vacant eyes. A wooden sign hung by one corner near the entrance, the painted letters barely visible. Harborside Railway Terminal. Final departure, March 1933. Lily pressed her face against the car window. "Mom, it looks haunted." "It looks like possibility," Rachel replied, forcing optimism she didn't feel. "Like a blank slate we get to fill however we want." Jasper bounded ahead as they approached, tail wagging with the enthusiasm only a dog could manage for such a desolate place. The entrance door hung crooked on its hinges, and inside the ticket office was vast and empty. Brick floors, most cracked or missing entirely. A wooden counter covered in decades of dust. Graffiti on the walls suggesting local teenagers had used it as a hangout until even that lost its appeal. But the walls were solid brick, the ceiling beams thick timber, and there was enough space for them to create a living area while Rachel figured out long-term solutions. That first night, they camped on the floor in sleeping bags, a battery-powered lantern creating a small circle of light against the vast darkness. Wind howled through broken windows, and strange sounds echoed from deep within the structure, groans and creaks of old materials settling. Rachel barely slept, listening to every noise, wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. But Lily slept soundly beside her, one hand resting on Jasper's fur, and that sight alone convinced her they'd make it work somehow. The following weeks became a blur of activity. Rachel took extra shifts at the beachside restaurant where she worked, saving every penny for materials. She borrowed tools from coworkers and spent her days off cleaning, repairing, making the terminal habitable. They boarded up the shattered windows with plywood, creating a dark but weatherproof interior. Rachel patched the roof leaks with tar and salvaged metal panels. She found a used generator for $18 and ran extension cables to power lights and a hot plate for cooking. Slowly, impossibly, the terminal was becoming home. But there was something strange about the place that Rachel couldn't ignore. Jasper refused to approach certain sections of the building, would stand at the threshold of the old maintenance tunnel with his hackles raised, growling at something Rachel couldn't see. And one evening while scrubbing the ticket office floor, Rachel discovered markings carved directly into the brick. Not cracks or natural imperfections, but deliberate engravings. Circles with radiating lines, triangles intersecting with squares, symbols she didn't recognize. She photographed them, tried researching them at the Charleston Library, but found nothing conclusive. Lily thought they were treasure maps naturally and spent hours tracing them with her fingers. The discovery happened 7 weeks after they'd moved in, during a winter storm that hammered the coast with terrifying fury. Rain assaulted the terminal horizontally, finding every weakness in Rachel's repairs. Thunder crashed so loudly it seemed to shake the very foundation. Around 1 in the morning, Rachel jolted awake to a sound that cut through even the storm's rage. A deep, grinding crack from beneath them. Lily sat up too, eyes wide in the darkness. Jasper barked frantically. Rachel grabbed their lantern and swept the beam across the floor. There, in the corner where those strange symbols were concentrated, a section of brick had collapsed, dropped several inches, creating a visible gap. By morning, the storm had passed, and Rachel examined the damage in daylight. The brick panel had been covering something, held in place by an iron frame that had finally corroded through. Beneath it, darkness yawned, a shaft dropping straight down about 17 feet with iron rungs embedded in the brick wall forming a ladder. Shining her flashlight down, Rachel could see the shaft ended at what appeared to be a horizontal tunnel leading back under the structure. This had to be maintenance access for the cable railway system, she reasoned. Workers would have needed a way to reach underground equipment. The question was what remained down there and whether it was safe to explore. Before we go any further, I need to know something. If you found a hidden shaft beneath your floor in a building everyone says is cursed, would you actually climb down there alone? Drop your answer in the comments because what Rachel finds down there is going to blow your mind. And if you're invested in this story, hit that subscribe button right now because this is about to get absolutely wild. Rachel spent 2 days reinforcing the area around the shaft and testing the iron rungs. She fashioned a safety harness from rope and carabiners, left a note in her car explaining where she'd gone, and on a Thursday afternoon when Lily was at a friend's house, she made the descent. The shaft was narrow enough that she could press her back against one wall while using the rungs. At the bottom, a horizontal tunnel stretched in 2 directions. One way ended after 25 feet in a collapse. The other direction remained passable. Rachel followed it, her flashlight beam cutting through darkness that felt almost solid. The tunnel was roughly cut, more natural cave than proper construction, with wooden support beams every 12 feet, many of them rotting. After about 60 feet, the tunnel widened into a chamber, and Rachel's breath caught. This was clearly artificial, a room carved from living rock, roughly circular and about 17 feet across. And in the center stood something impossible. A steel door, heavy industrial like a bank vault, set into a freestanding frame in the middle of the chamber. Not leading anywhere, just standing there. The door was secured with 4 separate locking mechanisms, all closed, rust covering every surface. Why would anyone build a vault in a maintenance tunnel? What could be valuable enough to warrant this level of protection? Rachel photographed everything from multiple angles, then carefully made her way back up. That evening at the Charleston Library, she researched the terminal's history. The Harborside Railway had been built in 1908 by Atlantic Coastal Transport, primarily to move cargo from harbor to plateau. It operated successfully for decades until the Great Depression hit. The corporation invested heavily just before the 1929 crash and hemorrhaged money as trade collapsed. In 1931, Atlantic Coastal sent their flagship vessel, the Carolina Dream, on a cargo run to Central America, insured for far more than its cargo was worth. The ship vanished off Florida's coast. No wreckage was ever found. The insurance company refused to pay, claiming insufficient evidence. Atlantic Coastal collapsed financially within months. The terminal closed in 1933 after a fatal accident, though records suggested the accident was more excuse than cause. The corporation was already bankrupt, unable to maintain facilities or pay workers. The final supervisor was a man named Theodore Walsh, who'd worked for Atlantic Coastal for 23 years. According to a newspaper article from March 1933, Walsh refused to abandon his post even after paychecks stopped, maintaining the terminal alone for weeks. Then Theodore Walsh disappeared. The article was brief, almost an afterthought. Terminal supervisor missing, presumed departed town. No investigation mentioned. Walsh simply vanished from history. Rachel's mind connected the pieces. A loyal corporation man watching his employer collapse. A hidden vault beneath his terminal. The timing just before the corporation dissolved. Had Walsh hidden something? Corporate assets protected from creditors? But what assets could fit in a vault that size? The answer came from an unexpected source. Vincent Chen, an elderly regular at Rachel's restaurant, had a grandfather who'd worked for Atlantic Coastal. When Rachel mentioned she'd bought the old terminal, Vincent's eyes lit with recognition. His grandfather had spoken about Walsh, said he was honest, cared about workers. When the corporation went under, Walsh tried to help people however he could. My grandfather said Walsh knew where some of the corporation's reserves were, Vincent explained quietly. Money supposed to go to workers as final pay, but the officers had fled. Walsh couldn't access official accounts, but he had other resources, the kind a smart supervisor keeps for emergencies. Atlantic Coastal dealt in valuable cargo, Vincent continued. Not everything that came through their docks got recorded in official manifests. The Depression was coming, everyone could feel it. A smart man might have set aside insurance, something tangible that couldn't be touched by banks. Rachel asked what happened to Walsh. Vincent shook his head. Disappeared one day. My grandfather figured he'd taken whatever he'd hidden and left town. But Walsh wasn't the type to run. He was the type to make sure his people were taken care of, even if it cost him everything. Rachel knew she had to open that vault, but the locks were complex and she had no expertise. The solution came at Lily's school fundraiser, where she met Martinez, a locksmith who donated his services. When Rachel mentioned antique locks she couldn't open, Martinez offered to help, curious about historical mechanisms. 4 days later, Martinez followed Rachel to the terminal. Lily was at school, Jasper secured upstairs, and Rachel led him down through the shaft to the hidden chamber. Those are pre-World War II vault locks, Martinez said, examining them with a jeweler's magnifier. Heavy duty, probably custom-made for maritime use. He looked at Rachel with respect. Can you open them? Martinez smiled. I can open anything eventually. It took him 4 hours, working with delicate picks and probes, occasionally applying oil to frozen mechanisms. Finally, Martinez gripped the door's handle and pulled. The hinges screamed and the vault swung open. Rachel shone her flashlight inside and her breath stopped. The vault was packed with wooden crates, dozens of them stacked floor to ceiling. Each crate was roughly shoebox-sized, made from dark wood with stenciling on the side. A ship's wheel crossed with an anchor and the letters ACT, Atlantic Coastal Transport. Rachel lifted the nearest crate. It was heavier than expected, and something inside shifted with a metallic sound like coins. She pried open the lid. Inside, nestled in old straw packing, were gold coins, dozens of them gleaming dimly despite decades of storage. Rachel picked one up, feeling its weight. One side showed the ship's wheel and anchor logo with the words Atlantic Coastal Transport Reserve. The other displayed a date, 1928, and a denomination, $10 gold. These are corporation-issued gold pieces, Martinez said, leaning closer. Some businesses did that before the gold standard ended, especially shipping corporations doing international trade. I've heard of them but never seen one. These have to be worth more than face value, just as collectibles, let alone the gold content. Rachel's mind reeled. She opened another crate, then another. all identical, all packed with gold coins. By her rough count, there were over 230 crates, each containing roughly 50 coins. That was approximately 11,000 coins total. If each was worth even a few $100s, she was looking at millions, several $1 million, life-changing money, never work again money. Lily goes to any college she wants money. But also complicated money, potentially illegal money, money that would attract attention and scrutiny she might not want. Martinez looked uncomfortable. Rachel, this is major, historically significant, not to mention valuable. You need to report this, get experts involved. But Rachel wasn't listening. She was thinking about Lily's patched backpack, about restaurant shifts that left her exhausted but barely solvent, about eviction notices and cheese sandwiches because protein was unaffordable. I need to think, she said finally. Martinez, please, don't tell anyone, not yet. Martinez studied her for a long moment. 1 week, he said. Then I'm assuming you've handled it appropriately. After Martinez left, Rachel spent hours counting, calculating. Approximately 11,000 coins. She needed to know their real value. The next morning, she called in sick to work and drove 90 minutes to Columbia, where a numismatist named Dr. Brennan had a shop. She brought 6 coins, claimed they were inherited from a relative's estate. Dr. Brennan's eyes widened when he saw them. "Where did you acquire these?" he asked, voice tight. "A relative's estate," Rachel repeated vaguely. Dr. Brennan examined each coin under magnification, checked weights, consulted references. The process took 90 minutes. Finally, he set down his magnifier. "Miss Morrison, these are extraordinary. Atlantic Coastal Transport gold coins are extremely rare. I've heard of them, never seen one. The corporation issued them in the late 20s, but when they went bankrupt, most were recalled and melted. Only a handful exist in collections today. In this condition, I'd estimate each coin is worth between $900 and $1,300 to collectors, possibly more at auction. The gold content alone is worth about $350. Rachel did the math. 11,000 coins, at minimum $900 each. 9 million, maybe more. "How many do you have?" Dr. Brennan asked carefully. "A few more," Rachel said evasively. He didn't believe her, but didn't push. "I could help you sell them," he offered, discreetly, for a 22% commission. Rachel stood, scooping the coins back. "I need to think," she said. As she left, Dr. Brennan called after her. "Please be careful who you talk to. There are people who wouldn't respect legal niceties if they knew you had something this valuable. Consider documenting your find properly. Treasure can be a blessing or a curse." Rachel drove home in a daze. 9 million, possibly more. The figure seemed unreal. But so did Dr. Brennan's warning. Documentation, legal protection, careful handling. One wrong move and she could lose everything. That evening, Rachel was still wrestling with the decision when she heard Jasper barking frantically, then Lily's scared voice calling for her. Rachel scrambled up from the vault chamber to find her daughter backed against a wall, Jasper growling at 3 men she'd never seen before. One was tall and muscular with gang tattoos. Another, shorter but stockier, with a face that suggested violence was comfortable. A third stood near the door supervising. The tall one held up his hands in a placating gesture, but his smile was cold. "Evening, ma'am. We heard you found something interesting in this old place. Thought we'd stop by and discuss it, friendly-like." Rachel's blood ran cold. Martinez must have talked to someone, let the secret slip. "Get out of my house," Rachel said, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. "You're trespassing." "Don't be hasty," the stocky man said, voice surprisingly gentle. "We're businessmen. We help people with complicated problems. You got something valuable, but don't know how to turn it into money without attracting attention. We can help for a reasonable cut." "I don't have anything valuable," Rachel lied. The tall man's smile faded. "Don't insult our intelligence. We know what's under this floor. We know what Theodore Walsh hid. Here's what's happening. You give us 60%, we handle sales, launder the money clean, and you get your share with no questions. Simple. Rachel felt Lily press against her, felt Jasper's continued growling. She could refuse, but these men weren't leaving. She could agree and hope for escape, but that meant surrendering everything. She could fight, but 3 against 1 with a child to protect made those odds impossible. The decision was taken from her when the stocky man suddenly grabbed Lily by the arm, yanking her away. The girl cried out, and Jasper launched himself at the man, teeth bared. The attack did nothing except get the dog kicked viciously into a corner where he lay whimpering. "Let her go!" Rachel screamed, lunging forward. The tall man caught her, his grip like iron. "Now you're going to cooperate," he hissed in her ear, "or the kid gets hurt." Then the world exploded with noise and light. The terminal's entrance crashed open, and suddenly the ticket office filled with Charleston County Sheriff's deputies, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The 3 men froze, surprise overriding instinct. Then they released Rachel and Lily, hands going up. Deputies handcuffed them, read rights, loaded them into patrol vehicles. A senior officer, a woman lieutenant, approached Rachel gently. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Turns out Martinez had been troubled by their agreement," the lieutenant explained. "He contacted us the day after opening the vault, wanted legal advice on his obligations. We've been watching the property, worried that if word got out, you'd attract the wrong attention. Seems we were right. Those 3 were released from state prison 8 months ago, been involved in several home invasions. Someone talked to them about your discovery." Rachel sagged with relief and confusion. "So you already know about the vault?" The lieutenant nodded. "We do, and we've been in contact with the county attorney and State Historical Society. You don't need to be afraid, Miss Morrison. What you found is legally yours under state treasure trove laws. But there's a process: documentation, assessment, tax considerations. We're here to help you navigate that, not take anything away." The next several weeks became a whirlwind. Historical Society experts examined the vault, documenting everything meticulously. The coins were cataloged, appraised, transported to secure storage. News leaked, and Rachel and Lily became minor celebrities. Reporters called, historians wanted interviews, collectors made offers. Rachel cooperated fully with all officials, answered every question honestly, and slowly the legal framework solidified. The final assessment came back at $10.3 million. After taxes, which required selling about 38% of the coins, Rachel netted roughly $6.4 million. More money than she'd ever imagined. But the story didn't end with wealth. The historical significance sparked renewed interest in the terminal's history. Researchers pieced together Theodore Walsh's complete story. He had hidden the corporation's gold reserves, intending to distribute them to betrayed workers. But before he could act, corporation officers discovered what he'd done. There was a confrontation, a struggle. Walsh died, his body dumped in Charleston Harbor, his secret dying with him. Until Rachel, in her desperation, purchased his terminal for $5 and stumbled into the truth. With some of her newfound wealth, Rachel funded restoration of the Harborside Railway. The terminal became a heritage site, the cable railway mechanism rebuilt and modernized. The upper terminus, where Rachel and Lily still lived in a properly renovated section, housed a museum dedicated to Atlantic coastal transport, to Theodore Walsh, and to the Depression-era workers whose struggles had nearly been forgotten. Rachel became the museum's curator, a job that paid modestly but fulfilled her in ways the restaurant never had. Lily transferred to a better school, made friends, stopped getting into confrontations. Jasper recovered from his injuries and grew old running freely around the cliff trails. Every day, Rachel sat at her desk in the restored ticket office with one gold coin displayed in a case beside her computer. The coin reminded her of many things: Theodore Walsh's loyalty and sacrifice, how good intentions could be thwarted by cruel circumstances, her own desperation, the day she'd signed a property deed with shaking hands and only hope as collateral. That sometimes fortune favors not the bold or brave, but simply the desperate who refuse to give up. But mostly, the coin reminded her that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars or coins or property deeds. It was measured in security, in knowing your child was safe and fed and had opportunities, in dignity, in not having to beg for scraps, in hope, in the ability to dream beyond the next rent payment. Rachel had bought an abandoned terminal for $5, but what she'd really purchased was a chance to build something better, to create security where there'd been only fear, to transform desperation into possibility. On weekends, when the museum was busy with tourists riding the restored railway and exploring exhibits, Rachel would sometimes walk down to the vault chamber. It stood empty now, the crates gone, the steel door propped open. But she could still remember that moment of discovery, the flashlight beam catching gold, her breath stopping in disbelief and wonder. Had Theodore Walsh known, she wondered, that his hidden cash would eventually reach someone who needed it as desperately as his workers once had? Probably not. But Rachel liked to think he'd approve, that somewhere Theodore Walsh was satisfied his sacrifice had meaning, that the gold he tried to protect had finally served its intended purpose. The railway whistle echoed across the gorge, tourists laughing at the views, children pressing faces against windows just as Lily once had. Rachel stood at the platform watching the cable car descend into the mist and smiled. She'd come here with nothing but $5 in desperation, had bought a cursed building on a cliff, and had somehow found her fortune beneath its floors. But more than that, she'd found purpose, a way to honor the past while building the future. Security and stability and hope. A home, not just a structure, but a place where she and Lily belonged. And sometimes when fog rolled in thick and the terminal creaked in the wind, she swore she could hear Theodore Walsh's whisper, thanking her for finishing what he'd started, for making sure the treasure finally reached the people it was meant to help. What an incredible journey Rachel had, right? From buying a condemned building for $5 to discovering $10 million in hidden gold, to nearly losing everything to criminals before being rescued at the last second. If Rachel's story moved you or kept you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We share incredible true stories like this every week, stories about ordinary people who stumble into extraordinary situations. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done if you'd found that vault. Would you have reported it immediately or been tempted to keep it secret? I genuinely want to know. Thanks for being here and being part of this amazing community. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best investments aren't measured in dollars, but in courage.